Hi, this is Cal, developer of Shackles of the Tyrant, and in this video I'll be giving you a bit of an overview of the entry and kind of some insight into the decisions that we made while designing it. So the premise of the game is that you are this hero sent up by your people to this space station, which holds this huge evil demon, which invaded your system a millennia ago, and now it's time for the chains that binds that demon to be renewed to make sure that it doesn't escape. That's your job. So gameplay wise, that translates to you need to get to the middle and touch a thing. So the main thing that we were going for with the gameplay was to have this kind of fully physics-based world where all the entities, from the bullets to the players to the enemies, they all follow the same set of physical rules. So you'll notice that when I'm moving, there's this what looks like a tiny little transition animation, but that's actually not an animation at all. That's the physics engine performing acceleration and deceleration to move your character from one tile to the next. As although all the controls and all the movement and the way that you interact with the world is discrete and tile-based, the world itself and the physics simulation going on underneath it is continuous. So if I just explore the dungeon a bit more, you'll notice up here we got our first enemy who is projecting a very nice red line to show us where it's going to be firing. And this kind of telegraphed attacks was quite important to us, as it's not immediately obvious now, but the gameplay can get quite chaotic, and since everything is very physically defined, giving you that information of where everything is moving and where the danger zone is going to be and all that is very important to be able to make interesting decisions around the physical rules and how you can manipulate them to your advantage. So these rockets coming in, they're quite slow, but they do a lot of damage when they hit us, and we can dodge them quite easily. However, we also have access to this force wave weapon, and the premise of it is that it just launches everything around you away from you. So if I use that and then move upwards, it'll launch the rocket away. And I was a little bit unlucky this time, but you see it did hit the ground a little bit, but if I was a little more accurate, I could have actually reflected that rocket back at the enemies. And obviously there's also the option of just shooting them. You'll notice that this kind of basic weapon that we have, first one that we have access to, has an explosive projectile, and also has, a few other interesting quirks to it. So this was a very important part of the weapon design for us, that we wanted to have each of the weapons, rather than just being stat differences in fire speed or range or whatever, to actually have their own unique personality, which then makes them have very unique situations where they're used and unique strengths and weaknesses, but then also unique downsides. So we've picked up these two other weapons: the emergency thruster, which is a thruster. It sends you flying in a direction that can be used for any mobility needs that you have, whether that be escaping from an enemy or engaging right into the thick of combat. But then you also, I'm not sure if you noticed, but there was a blast of projectiles at the front as well, which do a lot of damage if you can set it up correctly, or to actually be hitting something. And then the other weapon that we picked up, which I will demonstrate now, is the hydrocarbon explosive, which is essentially just a placed explosive barrel. Which, may not sound very useful, but depending on your creativity, there are plenty of ways that you can use that to really destroy or to get around situations that don't necessarily have another solution. And here's one of the more interesting enemies in the game, early on at least. The Leaper has a lot of health, but is also very slow, except when it gets close to you, when it performs this little leap attack. And since it's so big and massive, if that leap hits you, that's going to send you flying. And possibly just either crush you against a wall or fling you out of the station, or all sorts of terrible things. So ideally you want to take that out of range. Harpies, these little W's, they're more of a flying enemy. They're quite mobile, they rush right at you, and then when they get in range, they fire off a burst of shotgun pellets. So ideally you want to get, kill them before they get in range, but if they do get close, they're light enough where they can be blasted away with a force wave. If they're really close enough, that blast will probably have enough power behind it to smash them into a wall and kill them instantly. This other turret, or this other enemy, saturation turret, very inaccurate, and not particularly very powerful either, but very annoying if left unattended. So you may be noticing that each of the enemies has like their own little unique aspects to them as well. And this kind of all these unique and interesting little quirks were really important to us, the design, as through their combination both with each other and also the different weapons you have available to you, creates really interesting and emergent situations. So here we're approaching just over this wall is the area that we need to get to, and while we could maybe move around this wall and see if we can find an entrance into that area, we could always just put down a bunch of explosives and blast our way through. So yeah, you may notice that quite a large hole is being created here, and also walls being destroyed, and also a lot of enemies are being left. So these, this kind of extreme firepower has certain upsides and downsides, and just ignore me stupidly walking to that rocket. So that hole that was created in the station, that's not just going to be a problem this run. As I mentioned, that maybe I didn't mention this, but you perform 3 different runs in the game until you eventually win. And in each run, the enemies and weapons that you have available to you get more powerful. But the damage done to the station remains as well. So by the end of the 3rd run, essentially the whole thing can be destroyed, depending on how destructive the fight style, of course. So with that orb down now, these are the shackles that we have to get access to. So we're just going to do a bit of space walking to get there. We don't actually have any movement capabilities while we're in space. Obviously, you're floating in space, you can't walk miles. So to get there a bit faster, we're just going to fire our weapon back to take advantage of that recoil. And we made it just in time. It kind of looked like we died there, but that's fine. It's okay. So now in the 2nd run, we have a bit different of a standing kit. We have the emergency thruster as well as the bolt caster and force wave. And there you go. We have also some new weapons, Sanctuary Sphere, and some others that we'll hopefully be running into. So the Sanctuary Sphere is very unique. It's completely defensive, barring some extremely creative uses. But yeah, so we put this here. This turret will keep shooting at us until eventually the bullets rebounds just right to get it killed. We'll end its misery a little earlier, just for the sake of time. Pick up these extra weapons we've got. So the entry orb is the closest you'll ever get to kind of a second main weapon. Like the bolt caster, it fires projectile does damage. It doesn't explode though. Instead, its little gimmick is that it bounces. It does a lot more damage than the bolt caster as well. So we can use this liberally to kill all these opponents. But too many of these orbs flying around obviously can become an issue, as we don't want to be friendly firing ourselves, which is a very strong possibility when using this weapon. And the other weapon we picked up is the matter compressor. So it is an explosive, but instead of exploding, it implodes. And as you can see, that implosion was so powerful that it flung that harpy out of existence. Hopefully, it's off somewhere, not glitching out the physics engine too badly. And yeah, so the uses of that are quite varied. It doesn't really do that much damage, and I'll demonstrate that against a stronger enemy if I can find one like this Leaper, which is quite heavy. with its huge mass, it's not moved around that much, it doesn't really care that much about the explosion. But against other enemies, for instance this wyvern, this very conveniently decided to turn up for my demonstration. It's very, very effective. It's the wyvern, you can think of the wyvern like an advanced harpy. These waves coming off it don't do any damage, but they're essentially like our force wave. They repel projectiles. There you go. So we could keep shooting and try and get lucky, but chances are we're going to accidentally kill ourselves in the process. However, the matter compressor has enough range to get outside those waves, and the wyvern for it on its part is particularly massive or healthy. So all those walls, crushing it, can take care of it quite easily. I think I saw some missiles earlier. Let's see if we can find anybody responsible for those. Ah, here they are. So, here are some homing missiles coming in. Oh, and see, here is one example of the immersion physics system at work. That rocket just bounced off that harpy, flinging it into us, and killing the harpy, and now it's kind of drifting off. Oh, and I don't know where that harpy came from, but probably this caretaker over here. That's the wyvern. So this big C is a caretaker. It doesn't have any offensive capabilities, kind of. But what it does is it spawns these little C's that run at you and explode. Let's see if I can make any will die. Oh, there's one. So yeah, they get close, they explode, sending out a force wave, and creating a wall in their place. So as you can see, this corridor is very blocked up now, which can be an issue. And down there's one of the more advanced enemies, the Eye of Madness. So its thing is that it's an eye laser, as you might have suspected. But creative use of the Sanctuary Sphere can eliminate it pretty easily. Once the shield is around it, it's going to reflect itself, and eventually the laser will reflect back and kill it. Sometimes. The shield has quite a few gaps. It's not foolproof. So as you can see, most of these, well, a lot of these enemies are a bit more complicated than just shooting until they die, especially this wyvern fellow over here. And overall, I'm quite happy with the amount of depth that we managed to fit into the different enemies and the solutions that you can come up with for defeating them. And if you move your eyes up here, you'll notice that this giant hole we made earlier is still there. So maybe, actually, we'll go up there and use that to get into the area we did last time. Some of those eyes. Oh, and a feature that I haven't mentioned yet. Because we thought it would be fun, you have an ability to activate essentially full automatic mode on any of your weapons and have it. Basically, you don't need to retarget it every time. Your cursor tracks the enemy and it keeps firing. You'll notice I'm getting destroyed by my own projectiles, as intentionally designed. That rocket, I reflected it at the gremlin, but my own explosion from my bolt caster then reflected it back at me. Luckily, it was not fast enough to get me on that turn, but if it was a little faster, that would have been far differently. As you can see, there's quite a number of these little caretaker bots over here building up. This tends to happen when you leave the caretakers unattended, and although it's not the most threatening of situations, as they don't really do much damage, having all these walls blocking up your firing paths can get quite frustrating. And I just took a laser. I'll try not to die here, yeah. But notice this Leaper, being a firmly grounded enemy, floating in space, it has absolutely no control over its movement until it actually reaches that tile. But, you might see if we can stop that from happening. There you go. To space. So I'm not quite sure if I'm comfortable fighting these guys like this. So what I might do is chuck down a sphere, and too late, let's shut back later. But yeah, that's the general idea of the game. I hope you enjoyed watching. I hope this repeated eye laser firing sound isn't too annoying right now, but as you can see, the simulation kind of keeps going after you die, and you get to watch as all the enemies that killed you kind of fight over your corpse. So if this seems cool, and something that you enjoy, or that you would enjoy, please go check it out on itch and download it and see what you can do with these tools that we've given you. I'm sure you can find out, or I'd be really interested to hear what you managed to do with some of the explosives. Anyway, thanks for watching.